is alive! Fire! Fire! Get out!
In the middle of the 19th century, humanity begins to believe it has finally conquered distance itself. Across Europe and North America, telegraph lines stretch endlessly beside railroads, across rivers, over mountains, and through growing industrial cities. Messages that once required weeks of travel by horse or ship can now move across entire countries in only minutes. Information begins traveling faster than human beings themselves for the very first time in history. The world feels smaller. Governments coordinate faster. Markets react faster. Newspapers print stories from distant cities only hours after they happen. Merchants, bankers, and politicians increasingly depend on invisible electrical signals flowing silently through copper wires suspended above the earth. A new age is beginning. Factories rise beside crowded rail yards. Steam engines thunder across continents carrying coal, iron, and cotton into expanding industrial economies. Ports grow larger. Cities become brighter. The modern world seems to be accelerating toward a future without limits. To many people living in 1859, this new network appears almost miraculous. Human civilization has started linking itself together through electricity, and with each new wire stretched across the land, humanity grows more confident in its own power. But beneath that confidence lies a vulnerability no one yet understands. Civilization is becoming dependent on systems it cannot physically see. Invisible currents now carry communication, commerce, and coordination between nations. And because those systems appear stable and reliable, people slowly begin trusting them completely. No one yet imagines that the planet itself exists inside a far larger electrical system. Far above the Earth, 93 million miles away, the surface of the Sun begins to change. During the late summer of 1859, astronomers across Europe observe unusually large sunspots drifting slowly across the solar surface. Dark formations appear larger and more active than normal, though science still understands very little about what these disturbances truly are. At the time, the Sun is still viewed as something constant and eternal, a distant source of warmth and light, not a threat. Among those studying it is British astronomer Richard Carrington, a careful observer who spends long hours sketching the movement of sunspots from his private observatory outside London. On the morning of September 1st, Carrington notices something extraordinary. As he watches the sun through his telescope, two brilliant flashes suddenly erupt near a cluster of sunspots. The light is intensely bright, appearing almost white against the solar surface itself. The flashes move rapidly and disappear within minutes. Carrington is stunned. He immediately records the event, unaware that he has just witnessed the first observed solar flare in human history. At nearly the exact same moment, observatories elsewhere begin detecting strange disturbances in Earth's magnetic field. Needles drift unexpectedly. Instruments behave erratically. The connection between these events remains completely unknown. Humanity does not yet understand that violent eruptions on the Sun can send enormous waves of charged particles racing toward Earth through space. The idea itself sounds impossible. The Sun feels too distant to touch human civilization directly. But the electrical world humanity has just created is far more exposed to cosmic forces than anyone realizes. Across the continents, telegraph operators continue sending messages through wires that now span thousands of miles. Railroad dispatchers coordinate trains. Financial markets exchange information. Governments communicate across borders with unprecedented speed. Everything appears normal. Yet above the atmosphere, something has already begun moving toward the planet, an invisible storm crossing the emptiness of space itself. And for the first time in history, human civilization has unknowingly built the perfect system through which the violence of the sun can travel. The telegraph wires standing across the world seem like symbols of progress. Soon they will become conduits for a force powerful enough to remind humanity that even its greatest technological achievements still exist beneath the influence of the cosmos. The modern age believes it has mastered communication. It does not yet realize that it has connected itself directly to a star. On September 1st, 1859, only hours after British astronomer Richard Carrington observes the strange white flashes erupting across the surface of the sun, an invisible wave begins racing toward Earth through the darkness of space. The eruption on the sun has launched billions of tons of electrically charged particles outward at enormous speed. Humanity does not yet possess satellites, radio communication, or any understanding of what is moving silently through the void above them. No warning is possible. The people of Earth continue their ordinary routines completely unaware that the planet is about to enter one of the most extraordinary atmospheric events in recorded history. Far above the atmosphere, the incoming solar storm collides with Earth's magnetic field. The planet itself begins to react. At first, the changes appear subtle. Magnetic observatories across Europe and North America report unusual fluctuations in their instruments. Compass needles drift unpredictably. Telegraph systems experience strange interruptions and surges of current. Operators dismiss many of these disturbances as technical malfunctions, but by nightfall, the sky itself begins to transform. Across enormous parts of the world, brilliant curtains of light suddenly appear overhead. Red, green, and violet waves ripple across the heavens with unnatural intensity. The aurora borealis, normally confined to the far northern regions of the planet, expands far beyond its usual boundaries. People in Cuba, Hawaii, Mexico, and even parts of the Caribbean look upward in shock as the heavens glow with colors they have never seen before. In the United States, newspapers later report that the night sky becomes so bright that people can read books and newspapers outdoors without lamps or candles. Gold miners in the Rocky Mountains wake before dawn, believing the sun is already rising. Farmers prepare breakfast hours too early. Entire towns gather silently in the streets, staring upward at a sky that seems to be burning alive above them. Some believe cities in the distance are on fire. Others fear the arrival of divine judgment. For many people living in 1859, the event feels supernatural. Humanity has never witnessed the atmosphere behaving this way before. And while the skies blaze overhead, another invisible disaster begins unfolding across the growing electrical networks of civilization. Telegraph systems around the world suddenly start failing. Sparks erupt from telegraph machines inside crowded offices. Electrical currents surge violently through the wires. Operators receive painful shocks as they attempt to send messages across the network. In some stations, sheets of telegraph paper catch fire. The smell of burning insulation fills the air. Messages become scrambled or impossible to transmit as uncontrolled electrical currents overwhelm the system. Then something even stranger happens. Several telegraph operators discover that their equipment continues functioning even after disconnecting the batteries entirely. The storm itself is generating electrical current inside the wires. Human civilization has accidentally turned its own communication network into a planetary conductor for the energy of the sun. Across continents, invisible forces race through thousands of miles of copper lines suspended above the earth. No one understands exactly what is happening. Science in 1859 has no framework capable of explaining the event. Electricity itself still feels mysterious to much of the world. The relationship between magnetism, solar activity, and the atmosphere remains largely unknown, and yet the evidence is now impossible to ignore. Something from space has directly touched the Earth. For hours, the skies continue glowing with extraordinary intensity. Witnesses describe waves of crimson light stretching from horizon to horizon, like curtains of blood-red fire suspended above entire nations. In Europe, Asia, North America, and across the oceans between them, humanity witnesses the same terrifying spectacle at almost the exact same moment. One planet, one atmosphere, one star suddenly reminding civilization of its power. By the following day, the worst of the storm finally begins to fade. Telegraph systems slowly recover. The skies darken once again. Cities return to their ordinary rhythms. But the event leaves behind something far more important than damaged wires or frightened witnesses. For the first time in human history, civilization has seen undeniable proof that the sun is not simply a distant source of warmth and light. It is an active and violent force capable of reaching across space to interfere directly with life on Earth. The modern technological world has just received its first warning from the cosmos, and humanity barely understands what it has witnessed. By the end of September 1859, the skies above the world finally return to normal. The strange lights fade, the telegraph systems recover. The frightened crowds who once gathered beneath the burning heavens slowly return to their ordinary lives. Newspapers continue printing stories about the mysterious auroras and the malfunctioning telegraph lines, but the deeper meaning of the event remains hidden from almost everyone alive. Humanity does not yet fully understand what it has witnessed. The solar storm passes into history as a scientific curiosity, an unusual celestial event briefly discussed by astronomers and telegraph engineers before the industrial world moves forward once again. But the Earth itself has quietly received a warning. For the first time in recorded history, civilization has experienced the direct influence of space weather, and it happened at the very beginning of the electrical age. In 1859, the world is only lightly connected by technology. Telegraph wires stretch across continents, but most daily life still depends on horses, steam engines, printed paper, and human labor. Cities do not yet rely on electrical grids. There are no satellites orbiting above the atmosphere. No computers manage transportation, communication, banking, or defense. The modern world remains decades away, and because of that, humanity escapes the true consequences of the Carrington Event almost entirely by accident. If the same storm struck Earth today, the outcome could look very different. Modern civilization now depends on invisible technological systems far more complex and fragile than the telegraph wires of 1859. Satellites guide aircraft across oceans and continents. Global banking systems move trillions of dollars through digital networks every day. GPS signals coordinate shipping, agriculture, transportation, emergency response, and military operations across nearly every nation on Earth. Electrical grids power entire megacities containing millions of people. The modern world functions because electricity flows continuously through enormous interconnected systems that circle the planet. And those systems exist beneath the influence of the same star that erupted in 1859. Scientists now understand that the Carrington Event was caused by an extreme solar storm known as a coronal mass ejection. Vast clouds of magnetized plasma erupted outward from the sun and collided directly with Earth's magnetic field. The collision generated powerful electrical currents across the planet itself. Today, researchers monitor the sun constantly using satellites and solar observatories positioned far beyond Earth's atmosphere. They study sunspots, magnetic instability, and solar flares searching for signs of future storms. Because another Carrington-level event is not a question of if, only when. In March of 1989, a far smaller solar storm collapses the electrical grid across the Canadian province of Quebec within seconds. Millions lose power in the freezing cold. Satellites malfunction. Communication systems experience major disruptions. The event serves as a modern reminder that technological civilization remains vulnerable to forces originating far beyond Earth itself. Scientists estimate that a storm on the scale of 1859 striking the modern world could disable satellites, damage transformers, interrupt internet infrastructure, and trigger massive blackouts across entire continents. Some projections suggest recovery could require months or even years in heavily affected regions. The economic consequences alone could reach trillions of dollars. But beyond the financial damage lies something even more unsettling. The Carrington Event reveals how fragile modern civilization truly is. Humanity often imagines itself separated from nature by technology. Cities glow with artificial light. Data moves invisibly through fiber optic cables beneath oceans. Machines orbit above the atmosphere itself. The modern world appears stable, engineered, and controlled. yet all of it still exists inside a magnetic field orbiting an active star. The same sun that allows life to exist on Earth also possesses the power to disrupt the system civilization depends upon most completely. The wires of 1859 have become the satellites, power grids, and global networks of today, and the warning carried by the burning skies of the Carrington Event has only grown more relevant with time. The storm of 1859 did not destroy the world because humanity had not yet fully electrified itself. Today, the situation is very different. A civilization connected by invisible systems has become vulnerable to invisible forces arriving from space. The people who stared upward at the crimson skies in 1859 could not possibly imagine the technological planet humanity would eventually build beneath the sun. Nor could they know that their generation had witnessed the first great warning of the electrical age. The skies above them burned red for only a single night, but the message carried within that light still echoes across the modern world today. Humanity connected itself with wires, satellites, and signals, believing it had mastered the planet. The Carrington Event quietly reminds us that civilization still lives beneath a star,